And now on Nights with Steve Price, the Courses and Careers Show with Danny Bielik. Thanks to Management Consultancy International. Go to mci.edu.au.
Danny's in the studio as he is each Wednesday. Welcome back from the Philippines.
Thanks. How are you, Steve?
Drug problem there?
Massive drug problem there, and a lot of it is linked to unemployment, particularly youth unemployment. You know, there's a general, air of hopelessness amongst a lot of youth in the Philippines, and I think that's a really big problem, and I'm guessing that there's some of that undercurrent here as well.
Do you pick up when you're there that there's a lot of people without work? I mean, Can you see it on the streets?
You can see it, Steve, absolutely everywhere on a normal working day, and traffic is absolute gridlock there. There are people who are just, I don't know what they're doing, Steve, but they're meandering by the side of the road. They've got no shoes on. They clearly haven't had a bath in a while. And it's not a small amount. It's not like the odd person that you see here or there like you would in a developed city like Sydney. It is absolutely
So it's
everywhere.
a third world country that is struggling, is it?
Yeah, it really is.
Is it economy struggling?
Their economy is struggling as well, Steve. They've had years and years of entrenched corruption in that economy. And when you actually look at places that have been on the go, I mean, they started with an inherent advantage in having a large amount of their population who speak the English language. So they had everything basically
Stable
going
religious
for them.
country, Catholic.
Correct. And if you compare that with the likes of Singapore, you compare it with the likes of Thailand, you compare it with the likes of Malaysia, those countries have tracked upwards on various different kinds of trajectories.
But pretty positive.
Very, very much so, and stably positive. Even through the Asian financial crisis, the global financial crisis, they were going onwards and upwards. And the Philippines, unfortunately, it appears, Steve, that they've honestly...
Well, they did have a corrupt dictator in Fidel Marcos who... just basically stripped the country of all its money and stuck it in his own Swiss bank account. Yeah,
and not to mention, and shoes of Imelda's wardrobe.
So, obviously, there are some people there who are well-to-do who are doing okay, middle class, and you're there
is
because they want Australian education.
There's a growing middle class in the Philippines, and, there's a great two-way trade in services between Australia and the Philippines. What would be great is to see that sort of thing trickle down. For them to be able to have a system like we have in Australia where pretty much anyone can gain access to a tertiary education, would do their economy no world of good.
Stories that have emerged over the last couple of days in regard to entrance to university, and Scotch College has been in the gun story that was in the Fairfax newspapers.
Correct.
I must say, reading that detail, I was surprised that system existed, but it's quite commonplace, an early offer scheme into university.
Yeah, it is very commonplace, in fact, Steve, and these are called alternative entry pathways. So they were designed really in the very early iterations of this sort of thing to enable people who maybe are a little bit older in life, maybe didn't finish their HSC or their leaving certificate, if you go back to people of your generation, Steve.
What?
And
matriculation, thank you.
There you go, matriculation, and enable them to gain access to university. And they could do that through a number of different ways. They could show perhaps that they had exceeded the benchmark of what it would take to enter uni because they've done extraordinary things in the world of work. Maybe they've gone to a pathway qualification like a diploma or advanced diploma at an approved college, or maybe their own pathway providers, and most universities own their own pathway providers.
I don't understand what that means.
What that means is that, say, for example, University of New South Wales, University of Western Sydney is a really good example.
Yep.
They own another organisation called UWS College. UWS College, if you didn't complete your HSC, if let's say you've been working out there in the world for 20 years, you decide all of a sudden you want to go and do a degree, you approach UWS College and they say, look, here's what you've done. Here's what you need to have in order to start at university, and we will help you do some of it through what's called vocational education and training. So they will do, say, 6 months or a year of training to fill in the gap, and when you're confident and comfortable that you've completed that, and the university is confident and comfortable that you've completed that, then you can go straight into second year of university, and that's it. That's just like it is for a lot of private.
Most people are
colleges
aware
as well.
this exists.
Look, I hope that more people would be aware.
I'm
that
completely
it exists.
ignorant of this. I mean, but I'm not in that sector, and I've got children who are in high school who are just going through the traditional method to get possibly to university, maybe.
Which is great if you're 18. It's great if you're 18. You know, you're 18, your whole world for the previous 13 years has been about learning. You get up, you have your cornflakes, and you go to school. You come home,
And
you
for
do your
some
homework.
children, it's been all about attaining that ATAS level number
Correct.
to get into university.
Correct. And there's a few things that happen. Sometimes people finish high school and they go into work. Sometimes they finish high school and do some other kind of qualification. It could be a trade.
Or they take a year off.
Sometimes they take a year off. They're generally not covered by these sorts of schemes. But sometimes, they get sucked into the world of work and they do this thing. They find themselves at 30 and they decide, you know what? Kind of wish I had have listened to mum and dad and gone and done that university degree. There are all sorts of alternative entry schemes. But equally, Steve, there are people who have gone and banged away at the HSC and haven't done well. And they may not have done well for a variety of reasons.
Too young, bit immature, bad year.
Maybe they
personal
came from
circumstances.
Yeah, maybe they came from a non-English speaking background and they struggle with the language.
Year.
Yep, absolutely. Maybe they come from a disadvantaged community. Maybe they come from an Aboriginal community. And there's a range of additional ways that students can get into university. If you were to look at Macquarie University, right? So they've got an example here where students can receive an early offer to place in a university course at the university through what they call a global leadership entry program. Mm-hmm. So the conditions are you need to be a leader in your community and actively involved in extracurricular activities and getting good results at school. So, for example, you could be out there. For example, my niece went last year and she helped build educational facilities in Africa for underprivileged children. I mean, that's a really good example. There are plenty of examples where one of the people who works with us at Management Consultancy International spent a year in Israel, and she had gone and helped take Somali refugees and help them integrate into the Israeli community. And that could even mean things like learning how to observe basic hygiene, flush a toilet.
So Macquarie University sets aside a number of places for someone who's shown community spirit.
Yep. Then you've got people who come from rural areas. Now, rural students are naturally at a disadvantage. They often can't get regularly to classes, particularly in their HSC years. They may have to tend to things on the farm. Distance may be a problem for them. Access to certain programs may be difficult for them. I mean, they may not be able to do a 3-unit art subject at school. So how do they get in? So some universities give bonus points for students who show aptitude but come from a rural area. Then there are some that I honestly question, Steve. There are some like sports scholarships. Now, some people may say, looking at me, that's probably how I got through university.
What's wrong with a sports scholarship?
Well, but what's that got to do with your ability to be able to complete something that is an academic qualification at a university? If you're going in, Steve, you're sitting there and you've worked your guts out.
Isn't that what the Rhodes Scholarship Program is completely all about?
Let's talk about...
Don't we celebrate the fact that Tony Abbott, Bob Hawke, Kim Beazley, Malcolm Turnbull were all Rhodes Scholars, and you can only be a Rhodes Scholar if you're talented at a sport?
Yeah, look, absolutely, and certain people do that. But
we're going to take a break and come. I'm going to talk about this because I've got at least one child who's not academically brilliant, but is pretty good at a sport, and she's trying her hardest to find a way to get a sports academy.
Let's see if we can get her into something.
28 minutes to 10.
You're listening to the Courses and Careers Show with Danny Bielik, thanks to Management Consultancy International. Go to mci.edu.au.
Danny's with me. They have high schools in New South Wales. There's one up on the northern beaches.
Correct.
That is a sports high school.
Yep.
That you go there because you're talented at sport.
Fantastic.
So can't you marry together sports achievement and academic achievement, and don't you then create out of that a complete person who's probably a great individual to have in a business.
Yeah, and Steve, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's partly the idea. But the problem is, what happens if you've got a system like they have in America, where you have some really, and I'm sorry to say, dumb people who are selected to go into a university not because they show some aptitude academically and they happen to be good at sport, but purely because they're good at sport. These students may not be able to read and write. They're the people who may be competing for spaces at universities that your
But
daughter
you have a great
might
basketball
get into.
team.
Fantastic.
You have a
Steve.
good football team. Your rowing team will always win. I mean, there are scholarships available to universities in the United States, for example, because my daughters are both involved in rowing.
Correct.
Where they take a coxswain for a boat.
Yep.
And I know a couple of kids who are on full scholarships to universities in Boston.
Well, you've even got
because they
that.
can sit in the back of a boat and steer it.
Hey, Steve, you've even got that sort of situation happening, and Scots College seems to be coming under the
so
radar.
what was that all about?
So here's the school, if you remember, that was buying in kids from other schools because they could play basketball,
Yes.
right? So here they are again in the newspapers, and effectively what it looks like has been happening is that the University of Sydney was using these alternative academic pathways, or these alternative entry pathways into their university to actually create a program specifically for HSC students at Scots College, which is a boys' school in the eastern suburbs of Sydney, and saying to them, look, you can bypass the HSC. You don't need to worry about that. Do a 17-week diploma in your last year of school, in year 12, and we will consider that to be the equivalent of doing the HSC, and we will guarantee you a place at the University of Sydney prior to the ATAR and all of those sorts of things come out.
So presumably you had to pay to do this, did you?
Well, it looks like it. It says that
So is this offered to every high school?
So Sydney Learning normally charges $12,000 for the diploma, typically aged at mature age students who missed out on the HSC, but it didn't disclose how much it charged Scots. Now, Steve, I rang Professor Michael Spencer's office today, from who's the Vice Chancellor at the University of Sydney, to ask a few more questions and see if he'd appear on the show tonight. Unfortunately, Michael Spencer's office didn't get back to me today.
Oh, funny.
So, yeah, I know it's funny, isn't it? But there you go. And I mean, this could have easily been dismissed, but here we are still talking about this situation.
So let's recap there. You can, if you're the parent of a Scotch College Year 12 boy, Scots College Year 12 boy,
yep,
and you have the cash,
yep,
you can sign up to this 17-week program.
Correct.
That you can do as an alternative to the HSC.
Yes.
And if you pass that
yes,
17-week course...
Run by the university.
Run by the university, so the money's going to the uni.
Yeah, yeah.
You got a guaranteed spot at Sydney Uni.
Correct.
Well, why wouldn't you do that every day of the week if you had the money?
Absolutely. And in fact, last year...
So someone now put a stop to this?
Well, last year 11 boys did it. Last year I think 8 boys did it and 6 got offered a place. And currently it seems like they have put a stop to it, but what they forgot to do when the academic board took action and put a stop to it was put a stop to the 11 boys who are currently in progress completing this course. Well, that's exactly right. But the reality is that
these the parents of the 2 who didn't pass.
These all
at $12,000 a pop.
You'd have to worry what they were doing for the 12 years previously at Scots College, maybe basketball.
So. Has the government said that this is going to now be discontinued? What's your friend, the Education Minister, said?
Here's the problem. Adrian Pickley, who is the Education Minister in New South Wales, minus vocational education, because he had that hacked off by Mike Baird last week. It looks like he has come out and said he's not thrilled about it, but he didn't really form a view because, he'd like to have a bet each way, I guess. Luke Foley, however, who's the opposition leader in New South Wales, has come out and absolutely slammed it, and pretty much every alternative entry pathway program in its wake as well. He said they would get rid of the whole bloody lot of them. Now, the problem, of course, there is that you're also getting rid of access for Aboriginal students, for Torres Strait Islander
for older
students,
people.
for older people,
Country people,
for disabled people, for country people. Absolutely. So, these are very dangerous words, and if Luke Foley wants to be the Premier in New South Wales...
Foley would understand that system at all.
And it's a very complicated system.
Well, I didn't understand. I didn't even know it existed.
Yeah, and for every university has a range of these.
That's Luke Foley's class warfare stuff. That's what that's about.
Yeah, well, it is.
Luke Foley would be better off saying, I'll investigate and find out how this all works and see whether I think it should still continue or not, is what he should have said.
Well, that's right. And instead he came out
and thought that he'd get a headline. Should have picked the phone up to you and said, can you tell me how it works?
Yeah, I'm waiting for that phone call. You can ring me any day at MCI. I'm there.
There is a place for these alternative entrance schemes,
Correct.
But you think they just need to be policed better. And what we've obviously seen happen in the Scots College example is they've simply gamed the system, haven't they? They've just worked out a way around it.
Yeah, they have. And it looks like, they're basically... You've got to remember that the University of Sydney was always set up to be the elite university in New South Wales. The Chancellor, or effectively the chairperson of the University of Sydney, is by convention the Governor of the state of New South Wales. Sydney Grammar School was set up to be the entry into the University of Sydney, and effectively Scots College is saying, well, you know what? We can play the Me Too game. We can be in there and we can say, you know what? Come and send your boy to Scots College. Doesn't matter if they're academic or not academic, which is good. That's
but I presume you have to be academic to pass the 17-week course, don't you?
You would hope so, but these
would that course be easier or harder than the HSC? I mean, you're not competing with as many people for a start, are you?
Yeah, you're not. And to be honest, if you're looking at 8 students, of which 6 out of 8 were getting in and they hadn't completed the HSC, you do have to wonder. Typically, alternative entry programs are designed to be much broader in terms of what they're looking for.
Peter in Roselle, how are you, Peter?
I'm good.
Got Danny and Steve here, yep.
Yeah. The Sorbonne in Paris, right? That's probably one of the most prestigious universities in France.
Mm-hmm.
You can go into any course there with whatever entry level you've got. Don't expect to stay there if you don't pass the first exam.
Yep.
But, this hubbub that they carry on with Australia, with all this... I grew up in the era where it was like trying to keep you out of the university was the education department's main objective. This HSC is the same thing. We drop the standards for everybody.
Mm.
And look, I have 4 friends who are extremely successful in business, and they have no education.
Well, there's plenty of examples of that, and we've talked about it before. But, I mean, Peter's point there, Danny, about if you get in there and you fail the first exam, you're out.
Yep. Which is effectively, Peter, what some of these things, like I mentioned before, UWS College, that's really what those sorts of things are designed to do. You've got a much wider funnel, so you can catch a much larger proportion of the Australian community and say, all comers can come in, we will teach you, we will filter you, and we will work out, you know what, is university for you or is some other kind of qualification?
Did you go to uni, Peter?
No, I didn't. And I was
Me either.
I was very successful. I went to uni in New South Wales after I left. I would have got mature age entry.
Yep.
And look, who cares who goes in on day one? It's the standard when you're inside there.
Yep.
And if you look into the Australian university system to attract foreign students, they're starting to throw in 3 years of work, Australian permanent residence, all these other come on. You can get a Master of Commerce degree, I think it's probably Sydney Uni, but less than, I think it's about 10 hours chalk and talk a week.
Yep.
Chalk and talk, I love that.
Chalk and talk is the old-fashioned term. Well, it's the term for
Peter's
the
right,
old-fashioned
though, isn't he?
He's absolutely right. Peter, I can't disagree with anything that you say there. And I think, Sorbonne is a really good example of a way of catching as many people and filtering as possible. What you wouldn't ever want to do is boot people out on their ear, even if they are, particularly if they are trying but may not be able to reach an academic level. You want to keep them and just put them into some other kind of program.
Great to have you in here, Danny. Thanks for explaining that, because I had no concept of those courses existing. I'm sure most of our audience didn't either, and I now understand what all that fuss was about.
Thanks, Steve.
Danny Bielik from MCI. Be back with us next week, 15 to 10.